Well, we're fortunate to have as part of our series today Mr. Nick Wakim, founder and chief executive officer of Phoenix Lithium. Nick, it's a pleasure having the opportunity to sit down with you and share your remarkable career. Let's begin, if we could, with the early aspects of your life. Born in Melbourne, but with Lebanese heritage. Walk us through the background of the Wakim family, if you could.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. Bit of background on the family. So, as you said, we're Lebanese of origin. My father came here in the mid-'60s. Met my mother, who was here. They got married, so I was born here. I left. My father was an entrepreneur, businessman, and I was here, I think, till I was about 4 years old, and then we went to Papua New Guinea. My father had a venture there, a business venture. So we were there for a few years. From there, we went on to Lebanon. I think we got there about 74, 75, something like that. Unfortunately, the war broke out. The civil war in Lebanon broke out 75, 76. So we had to evacuate effectively, and off we went to America, in Chicago. So that's kind of the brief background. I was in Chicago from sort of 9 through my sort of formative years, high school. Again, Dad, like I said, was doing business in the Middle East as well. So as time got on, it was better to sort of move to England. So we moved to Oxford, which was closer to the Middle East. He was doing a lot of business in Saudi Arabia at the time. And that's really not conducive for a family back in the sort of 70s. It was a bit difficult. So, it was a lot easier to have the family in Oxford. It was easier for him to commute back and forth that way. So, it was, in hindsight, it was very good. We picked up on a lot of different cultures. So that was sort of the early part of the situation. And, that's where we are.
Tell us about, obviously, moving around, like you said, Papua New Guinea and Lebanon and the US and England. How difficult is that as sort of a young child in terms of trying to fit in and make friends and that sort of thing?
Look, to be fair, when you're going through it, you don't know anything different. So as a youngster, I mean, now when you think of it in hindsight, you can look back and see it in a different light. But back then it was normal. I mean, we knew no better. I knew no better. So from here, Papua New Guinea, a couple years there, Lebanon, 3 or 4 or 5 years there, Chicago. Look, when I got to Chicago, like I said, I mean, I've always been a positive person, so it really didn't affect me. I didn't really think about it. So there wasn't really any issues with doing that for me. In hindsight, you can go back and say it was difficult in terms of building long established relationships because you're moving from so many places all the time, different schools, different grades, all that kind of stuff. So in hindsight, it's probably, a little bit more difficult. On the positive side, you're getting exposed to more cultures. You're getting exposed to different areas. So, for me, it wasn't really an issue at the time. But, it wasn't just that. I mean, from the States, we then went to England, as I said, went to high school in England. My father got ill and started to get ill around that time. My mom's family were all here in Australia. So as he got ill, he wanted to transition back to Australia. We were unaware, as a matter of fact, that he was ill. So, he wanted to come back and bring the family back here, and then he passed away here in the late 80s. So, it was part and parcel for us. Moving around all the time was part and parcel, so we really didn't see it as an issue at that stage.
Tell us, if you could, a little bit about your parents. As you said, your father was quite an entrepreneurial businessman. What sort of impact did they have on you, and what are some of the learnings that you learned from them?
Look, I mean, that's a good question. My dad was, a blazing entrepreneur, to be honest. I mean, he did a lot of things that were firsts. He did one of the first logging concessions in the late 60s and early 70s out of Papua New Guinea, shipping logs into Japan. Before that, he was in Liberia, trading products and commodities, with the natives, and just an incredible backstory. But he's always been a true entrepreneur's entrepreneur in the strongest sense of the word. So he did that and as he moved to different things, he would move the family as well. So that's why we moved along all those different places. as he moved to different areas, the family would sort of tag along. You know, he went from there. I mean, his last venture was in the Middle East with the Saudi royal family. He set up a company called Sadco, which was the first integrated dairy in Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know if you know much about that, but back in the 70s, they have no fresh milk. They have nothing. It's all like powdered milk is the only thing they have there. So he had a vision to basically do a fully integrated, fresh milk, cream, ice cream, yogurt, but there's no dairy, there's no pasteurization, there's no trucking, there's no milk bars, there's no distribution. So they had to set up the whole thing, and actually it became 35,000 milking cows. It was in the Guinness Book of World Records, actually, as the largest integrated dairy farm in the world, and it was in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia. So he was very aggressive, as I said, as a businessman, as an entrepreneur, and that's obviously rubbed off on me, even though I didn't think so much. He passed when I was very young, so we really never had time to sit down and talk business. You know, I was majority at school before he passed, so I didn't think that I'd learned a lot of lessons from him, but obviously there's some instinctual things that I've picked up from him because I am quite aggressive in my own career. And, you know, I think I've picked up some of that from my father, for sure.
If I'm not mistaken, owing to the passing of your father at age 20 or 21 or thereabouts, I think, you then had to pause your sort of studies and
Yes.
interest in business and take over the family business. Talk us through how much of a challenge this was for you personally.
Well, I mean, it was a baptism of fire, really, because, you know, up until that time, I'd done no work. You know, the family was quite, you know, we were well-to-do, I guess, for want of a better word. We'd never really had an issue growing up, and all of a sudden, Dad passes. He's an old-school businessman, so we've kind of gone from riches to rags, to riches to rags to riches again. That's kind of been the pattern, and you know, without getting into too much of the backstory, you know, we had a large venture, as I said, in Saudi. There were some complications there. When he passed, you know, there was international court cases for a long time, so that really took a toll. And when he passed, I was the oldest, and I was, I think, 21 or 22 of the children. And Mom, you know, old school businessman, we didn't know much about what was going on. Mom had no idea about the business. So when he did pass, all of this information started coming in, you know, international lawyers and trusts out of, you know, there, and, you know, International Chamber of Commerce, you know, cases and stuff. So it was a massive shock in terms of the inflow of material, and we had no choice but to sort of decipher it and try to learn as we go. So for me, it really put me in a spot where I couldn't continue with my schooling, of course. I just got married, and you know, it really forced me to, you know, as I said, pick up very quickly what was what and try to understand international things and trade and lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So it was probably a better grounding than school, I can assure you, in terms of the real world. And that really set me on the path. So from there, you know, understanding what the issues were, trying to deal with them, you know, sort out the family affairs, sort out his affairs, make sure we can get everything squared away. You know, it took a number of years. And at the same time, I had a young family as well. So I'm trying to balance that with obviously the family affairs. And, you know, so it really taught me how to become self-sufficient, disciplined in terms of the information that you have to go through and how you look at things. And like I said, I was not prepared at all for that level, because you're going from school level to basic international business. And there was a massive gap. But, you know, we did our best, and I think we got through it okay.
It really sort of signifies the beginning of your professional business career, and as I understand it, you founded a business called Vision Financial Group to provide corporate finance and advisory services to a range of clients in those early days. Talk us through that particular business and its evolution.
That was a few years after Dad passed, of course. But what I've tried to do throughout my career, I'm a pretty instinctual person, and you've got to look at opportunities, and even at a young age. So Vision was set up basically in the early to mid 90s. You had very high inflation rate, very high interest rates here in Australia. So we looked at a business where you can take basically insurance bonds from insurance companies, create a loan for, let's say, a corporate loan or a commercial loan for a business or a company or whatever, but putting some of the funds into a bond which was high yielding and would offset the repayment. So you can end up having a quasi loan with, let's say, a bank. You had the investment bond and the insurance bond running alongside it. And what that did is it effectively allowed you to reduce your payments along the way, or keep your interest payments the same but reduce your capital at the end of the position. So that was a business born out of those high interest rates. And it worked very well. I mean, I was quite young, but we were dealing with Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, which is no longer around, Barclays Bank. There's a plethora of banks that we sort of started to work with, and that was quite a successful business. But not a lot of people were doing that at the time, and that was something that was designed specifically to take advantage of that time frame, and that taught me a little bit more about business and finance and structured finance and so forth. So yeah, that was probably something I'm pretty proud of at the early days.
Your next venture came in the form of a business called Intercorp Group, which among a range of services, as I understand it, was involved in joint venture and reverse merger transactions and debt facilities. Talk us through this sort of aspect to your business career. You're obviously late 20s, early 30s,
Yeah.
young family. Walk us through how you're going about sort of finding opportunities to start businesses like this.
Look, when you're young, as you know, you've got to be aggressive, because people say, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur and you're so aggressive by nature." It's not like that. When you're young and you don't have opportunities, and like myself, I didn't finish school, so it's not like you've got a whole wide range of places to go or people offering you jobs. You've got to forge your own path. So it's a bit more of having to do that out of necessity, not because of want, when you're early and young like that. And again, Intercorp came about at the tail end of Vision. Intercorp came about because as I started to understand business a little bit more and I got a little bit more seasoned, the Australian laws for investment at the time were quite prohibitive in terms of issuing stock options to employees or taking companies public. It was quite difficult in Australia. And in America, there was a much stronger ability to take on staff, pay people in options without being taxed for it. Doing corporate transactions like that, the US government, the tax laws or the investment laws were much more supportive of investors. So I saw a gap in the market here where small companies who wanted to raise capital or weren't ready to go public or pre-IPO, what we did is we looked at Australian companies and we took them public on NASDAQ. So again, that was a business, again, born out of what I saw as a necessity here. Not a lot of people were doing that. We did deals with companies you might not remember, but there was a company here in the early 90s called Linda Industries. They did the blankets, so we did a reverse merger. We did an LBO to buy that out here, and then we took it public. We bought it for something in the order of, I think, $30 million, and we listed it for something like $70 million US. So those are kind of the things that we're doing at Intercorp, and we're really focused on that, taking Australian private companies or pre-IPO companies and taking them to list in America. And that worked really well. Obviously, I have a background in the States, and I know a lot of people out that way. So that business was really structured on doing that. Also, that started to lead somewhat into the Middle East from the technology transfer side. The Gulf specifically was looking, in the sort of early, late 80s, 90s, and even till today, investing in projects or technologies outside of the Gulf, where then they can take that technology and then bring it back and develop it into their own country. So as we were dealing with technology companies and NASDAQ, a lot of these fit back into the Middle East as well. So there was a sort of tripartite position where we take, great technologies or innovation out of Australia, list them in America, and then if that technology fit, there was a third purpose, which was then to take that technology into the Middle East and start to develop it there. So that was almost like the precursor to the next venture, which was sort of Phoenix Group. And that was sort of the genesis of what we did there.
Over the course of nearly 3+ decades, you also led a company, as you referred to there, as Phoenix Group, through which you acted as an investor, a deal maker, an investment banker, and a corporate advisor to individuals and entities throughout the world. Give us a sense of sort of what some of those engagements were.
Look, I mean, as I said, the previous business led into that, but the core of that business was, I was based in Dubai at the time, So the core of that business was working with external companies, Macquarie Bank, Babcock and Brown, which you'll probably remember was an investment bank here, Grocon, UBS, mainly financial institutions that wanted to come into the Middle East or divisions of those institutions that wanted to come into the Middle East, especially the Gulf, and didn't really understand how to set up. So it was more of a strategic advisory merchant banking business. How do we come in? Do we go it alone? What are the rules? How do we establish ourselves across the Gulf? Where do we set up? Where do we set up our head office? Do we need a local partner? Is it better to have a joint venture? So a lot of these things, which are natural for me or the people in the Gulf, are not natural for companies coming outside. So that was the genesis of how we started. We're pretty successful, like we said. I spent a long time doing that. We had, as part of that as well, I was advising senior members of the royal family of Abu Dhabi and also Saudi Arabia. So, through that, I had developed some very strong relationships in the Gulf that enabled me then to do this work with some of these financial institutions and larger companies that wanted to come in to the Middle East. So we did that for a number of years and we're quite successful at that. And from there, that sort of led me on, as that business was more successful, to do principal transactions on my own. So we went out of the sort of investment banking, merchant banking, advisory business into the sort of principal business where we are located today. So that's kind of what we did there.
And how different is it having exposure to all of these sort of different markets? Like clearly the dynamics in running and operating businesses in the Middle East are different to the US and Australia. How much has that assisted you in your business career, having that exposure?
I think it's been very helpful for me because it allows me to move seamlessly through different jurisdictions. And as I said, it's very difficult. If you're an Australian company trying to do work in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, it's almost alien. So everything that works here at a corporate level, at a board level, or at a senior management level doesn't work necessarily there, and vice versa. So moving around to a lot of these jurisdictions, be it in the US, here, Middle East, I think gave me a particular edge where I was able to conduct my business effectively and efficiently because I did have exposure to all these jurisdictions and I was able to bring these entities together and create those synergies that were required to create successful businesses, whether it was Australian companies or US companies going to the Gulf or vice versa. It was mainly that way. A few entities came from the Middle East out this way, but the majority of the transactions were there. So I think that's been a very helpful tool for me in having that exposure and being able to deal in that area.
Let's now then fast forward to 2009 where you launched a venture called Phoenix Water. Give us a sense of sort of the impetus of that business and then its eventual move towards Phoenix Lithium in 2015.
Yeah, so again, I was in Dubai, based in Dubai at the time. We still had Phoenix Group as an entity running, but I'd started to do my own principal transactions and, more and more so. We've been successful and now I'm looking to do my own thing. So one of the things in the Middle East, and again, just sort of trying to think outside the box a little bit here, especially in the Gulf, you have the highest water use per capita in the world and the lowest freshwater rate in the world. So you have this perfect dichotomy there where they have massive desalination plants and power plants because they have no water. So in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, this is the principal way that they get fresh water. Now, typical desalination plants are inherently inefficient. Typically, if you're taking in, let's say, a ton of water, 50% of that becomes sort of potable or usable. The other half has all the sort of junk or the waste material, and that goes back into the oceans and the waterways and whatever. So first and foremost, it's very uneconomic. These plants are costing $3, $4, $5, $6 billion US. I mean, they're very expensive, very energy inefficient, and you're only getting 50% of your material out. So I started to look at this, and I thought there's got to be a better way, or there's got to be a way to improve upon these efficiencies. So that was my original thought pattern, and we started to look around the world at technologies that could further assist or enhance the output from desal. And without going through the long-winded story, I found actually in Australia, I found an incubator here where there was a group that was developing specifically that type of technology, high saline water purification. So basically this enabled you to sit behind those desal plants. Instead of getting 50% clean water, you can get up to 94% clean water. So that was the genesis of what we did. I took the engineering team out of the incubator, and I created Phoenix Water around them in 2009. And the basis was to create these secondary plants that would bolt on or sit behind desal, and that would give you the higher clean water or distilled water output. Now, when you're dealing with desal, and I mean, this sort of brings us into the pivot. Well, before I do that, I think it's important to say also that it was very successful, that business. We got to the stage where at around 2013, 2014, here in Australia, we had got a loan from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation to build these plants. We had a global patent on this technology that we developed. We effectively had a $100 million line of credit from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. It was a $20 million 5-year revolving credit facility to build these units, and we had just got that approval. But at the same time, and again, this kind of segues into it, when you're dealing with water and desal, you're dealing with salts. So brines all have soluble minerals in there, and those minerals are all salts. Table salt, sodium chloride, gypsum, all these elements are in the seawater. You also have lithium. Now, lithium is also a soluble salt in water. So as we started to understand the business of cleaning out this material and creating fresh water, you're also taking a commodity, which are salts. So as I'm looking at our business and as I'm further understanding the effects, I can produce fresh water and I can also produce commodities. And at this time, this is about 2012, early doors. Lithium is just starting to come on the horizon, and it piqued my interest. So as our plants were able to separate both these elements, I'm thinking, okay, water is X amount of dollars per ton. Table salt is $20 a ton. Lithium at that time was about $2,000, $3,000 a ton. So I'm thinking, if I can do this to create fresh water, why can't I focus on the commodities that come out the other side as well? And that was really the genesis of how we started to look at lithium. And that was really the genesis, as we're going on in the Phoenix water business to create these technology platforms. It was just at that time where we got this facility granted from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation that I said to my team, we're not going to take that. We're going to go into lithium. And needless to say, there was a few raised eyebrows, and my board thought, I'd lost my marbles. But again, this is the instinctual side of how I operate. I mean, I'm very instinctual in what I'm doing. So we pivoted, really started at around 2011, 2012, really trying to understand the lithium industry. As we further understood it, we were one of the first investors early doors in some of these revenue companies and smaller companies in the States and stuff like that. We went around the world looking at lithium, South America, Australia, Western Australia. We landed on America as where we wanted to go. So in about 2015 is when we got to the Imperial Valley, where our project is located now. And that's where we really started in earnest looking at the lithium industry and so forth.
And walk us through that period, the East Brawley project you came across in 2015. What were the origins of it, and how's it evolved over the past 10 years?
Yeah, good question. So look, we got to the Imperial Valley, which is the county that we're in, and initially we weren't at East Brawley. So initially the focus is the Salton Sea, and there you have companies like Berkshire Hathaway and a couple of other large-scale firms running geothermal operations. So initially the focus was looking at these geothermal plants in 2015 that were bringing up this brine. So the superheated brine was coming out of the ground, 500, 600, 700 degrees Fahrenheit at high pressure. And they were using that to create power, electricity, geothermal power. But that brine stream also has a huge amount of minerals in it. Now back in 2015, the technologies weren't really there to extract these minerals effectively, but we started looking at lithium. So we started initially not at East Brawley. We started working with Berkshire Hathaway in a way to show them how we can cordon off their geothermal business and create a secondary business behind their initial business, which was a commodities-based business for lithium or potassium or zinc or so forth. So that was the genesis of our dealings there. So in the Imperial Valley, you have separate geothermal anomalies. Up at the Salton Sea, you have East Brawley, you have the geysers. So there's 3 or 4 or 5 separate geothermal anomalies. And the focus was on the Salton Sea because that was the best, without getting too technical, when you're a geothermal company, you have to look at operating a plant and the metrics of, an economic geothermal facility. The lithium and the minerals is a bolt-on that comes secondary to that. So most of the companies and the incumbents that were there were all geothermal companies. We weren't. We're a pure play minerals company. So we're not looking at it through the matrix of geothermal. We're looking at it through the matrix of minerals processing. So to cut a long story short, we worked with Berkshire Hathaway for quite a while, 3 or 4 years. At the same time, lithium prices are going up on an upward swing. Information is a two-edged sword. They start to understand the value of the minerals business is much stronger, 3 or 4 times greater than their geothermal business. And we had agreed that we would become the developer of all of their minerals from all of their 9 plants. And they would take a royalty. At the end of the day, they had an idea. No, they wanted to own it. So they wanted us to build the plants for them to be basically contractor and take a smaller royalty. And that really infuriated me after all the years and effort and money. We weren't, we were still raising capital. It was very tight at the time. So we put, we just left a $100 million facility in our rearview mirror out of Australia. We're going to pick up this large project in California. And the principal says, no, we're going to do it ourselves now. So we quickly pivoted. At the same time, I had studied all the anomalies in California. East Brawley was not a good process or a plant to put up a geothermal plant, but it had a far superior minerals profile. So this thing was an open site. There'd been, multiple iterations of people drilling and putting wells and infrastructure there over a 30-year period. But everybody that did so saw that it was better to be in the Salton Sea for geothermal. We weren't geothermal. So we were able to go and pick up this whole anomaly where now it has a 3 times higher grade of lithium. It's a much larger resource than the Salton Sea. So we've picked up a far superior asset, again, because we looked at it in a different lens. And the optics were different for us and for the geothermal companies. So we pivoted away from the Salton Sea, really focused on East Brawley. We're very quiet and stealthy in our operations, so we're able to pick up the entire anomaly, which we now have. So that was really the genesis of how we pivoted. In East Brawley, we didn't get to it to probably 2020. So the first 4 or 5 years was working with Berkshire Hathaway and the other incumbents up at the Salton Sea. And by the time we broke away and relocated East Brawley, was about 5 years in. So we've only been formally on East Brawley. The genesis came to me, the idea, myself and our project director, Arnold Wolf, who's US based, probably around 2019, 2020. We formulated the idea, raised some capital. So 2021 was really the start of the East Brawley project. So we're basically 4 years into it now.
Give us a sense, if you could, just to the project scope and scale. As I understand it, 23,000 plus acres of surface and mineral rights, enough lithium to produce, I think, 1 million plus EVs per year. What does that all look like in a practical sense?
Look, I mean, to try to give you some concept or some idea of the scale, East Brawley would probably be in the top 5 largest lithium projects globally. It would produce enough lithium per year to power over 1 million EVs. So it's a very large scale project. Most of the junior projects in the world now are a fraction of that size. So this would be the flagship premier new lithium project that comes on the global scale of more importance and strategic importance than the US. So the US has none of these leading projects, or none of them are in the US. They're either in South America or some of them are in Australia, but the majority of the large-scale projects are in Argentina, Chile, and so forth. So it's very timely that East Brawley is a project that we're on now because it really meets the U.S. demand for wanting to differentiate itself and be self-sufficient in its critical minerals deployment and strategy. And this project is so large that it's really going to be the sort of poster child for U.S. critical minerals and lithium development. And not only lithium, we have huge amounts of potassium, zinc, so there's other elements there. So it's a very large scale project. And we're very proud to be the stewards of it and sort of, getting it to commercial reality.
You mentioned the strategic sense that it makes there. Clearly there's been a growing awareness by governments around the world of the national security implications of lithium development. How have you seen that has started to guide interest and development of lithium?
It's been very material. So, as said before, most lithium gets produced out of South America and some in Australia as well. Australia produces hard rock or spodumene. That gets shipped over to mainly China as a sort of semi-refined product, and then it's refined into the battery material in China. And China dominates that in terms of finished lithium product, about 80%, give or take, maybe even a little bit more of the finished battery material in lithium comes out of China. So obviously that puts the rest of the world in a difficult position where they're highly reliant. And you can see now we've got a position in the States, specifically in the US, where they really want to differentiate themselves away from that, and so does Europe. So for us to be located there in the same time where the rest of the world is trying to create its own minerals and critical mineral security has been very timely for us. So it's really helped us in terms of looking at the development of this project and bringing it online. As you know, there's been volatility in lithium. We don't look at that. Lithium projects are 30, 40-year projects. So year on, year off, up and down on the price is meaningless. I mean, you look at people like Rio CEO and many people that are not day traders in this, and we're certainly not, we're developers. So we take a much longer gestation period and a view of production on things like this. So for us, critical minerals, energy storage, lithium for EVs, these are givens now. They're going to get only larger and larger. The price points don't matter. But what's going to happen is we're going to evolve into these things, and having a project like East Brawley in America, in California, with the size and the scale that it has, is really going to allow us to be at the forefront of helping America or the United States secure its own critical minerals path and deliver a great business for ourselves as well. So it's very good.
In terms of the opportunity itself, I understand you appointed an investment bank to gauge international interest in deploying capital into the project. Where's that at today, and how have you observed global interest in a project of this size?
Look, there's a lot of interest in the project. We've appointed Macquarie Capital, so we're working very closely with them. They're our exclusive advisor onto this project. We're into the phase now, we're building our first plant. So our first, not the full-scale plant, the full-scale plant will produce about 70,000 tons of lithium per annum, which is very, very large battery-grade material. In California, we're building our first, what we call our IOP, initial operating plant. So this will produce about 1,400 tons a year of battery-grade material, and it'll be online in about 3 years' time. And we're in that process right now. So, we're in a critical phase of the development. We're starting in the build phase. We've gone from exploration and, securing the site to now going into the build phase of the project. And, that's a very exciting time for us. And this is the right time now for Macquarie to be looking, and we're talking with governments, we're talking with multiple tier one parties now, mainly strategics who all have an end use for lithium, be they OEMs or large scale car companies or governments that want to develop a battery industry or energy storage industry. So Macquarie is helping us with that side of the business, as we further develop going forward. So, we're at an important stage of moving the process forward now.
As you mentioned before, the East Brawley project comes at a time in which lithium development over recent years has reached fever pitch owing to the uptake of electric vehicles and other things, coupled with the realisation of the importance of lithium. Where's the sector at, generally speaking, now, and what do you see its future is over the next 10, 20, 30 years? Because that's clearly the lifespan for some of these sort of projects.
We've got a view that's not common to most people. Lithium has a high barrier to entry, okay? Lithium is one of the industries that's very difficult. There's not that many project managers or project execution development teams that are around today that have actually built high-scale, high-purity lithium plants at a commercial scale. We're very fortunate that we have one of those people that works for us. So Arnold Wolf, our project director in the States, has been involved in 2 large-scale lithium projects, delivered them to commercial scale, which is very, very rare. There's probably 4 or 5 people in the world that can say that. So we early doors saw when we went to the Imperial Valley, we're backtracking a little bit, but I think this is important. when we looked and analyzed the industry for lithium, we saw that there was not many places that had the expertise to deliver these plants. And for us being a small company coming into this market, how do we differentiate ourselves? We differentiate ourselves by having the best technical team and project management to be able to deliver a project like this. Because you can raise capital, you can build out teams, but if you don't have the skill set to deliver it, you're nowhere. So we early doors did that. I hired Arnold. He's been a core member of the team in this whole success story. As lithium goes forward though, and as lithium has been successful in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, where everybody knows about it now, there's multiple small juniors that are coming online around the world. The majority of these are going to fail, unfortunately, because these are assets or resources that have all been looked at over the last 30, 40 years, have been proven to be uneconomic. So now they're trying to look at new technologies to further accelerate the economic benefit of them, and some will succeed, but unfortunately the majority of them will fail. So there's a disconnect in the lithium market. Analysts and banks and so forth think there's going to be a huge amount or a big glut that's going to come on the market. That's not going to be the case. You're going to have 5 or 6 global producers at scale, at low cost, as we're in a low cost margin now, and that's really where you want to be. And East Brawley has that ability to do that. We're the lowest cost per ton producer of the new projects coming online, and the biggest at 70,000 tons capacity per year. So the market is undeniably going to be here. We're certainly moving into an electric position with cars, but even more importantly, energy storage solutions is going to be much larger than vehicles. And this is something a lot of people don't understand. For renewables and the storage for all these type of elements, even for military operations and all these kind of things, and drones and things for the future, is all going to be lithium based. So there's a massive upswing in the uses of lithium, but the supply that is projected to come online is not going to be there. And we have that's not the common view. The common view is there's a lot of lithium that's going to come on the market, and prices are going to come off, and that's not going to be the case. And we've been saying that for the last 5 years. And if you look at project development, it's actually exactly what we said. All these projects come online, they don't meet their timeline, they don't meet their budgets, they don't meet the quality specification, they go over on capital because there's no expertise. There's a lot of capital, there's a lot of engineers, there's a lot of scientists, but there's not a lot of people that have delivered lithium. So we're in a very unique position ourselves that we have a large-scale, lowest-cost lithium project with a team that has executed and delivered on that, and that's a very unique combination. So for us, we see it as a very strong position moving forward for us. Unfortunately, the industry is going to contract in terms of its supply, which means prices are going to come back up again in the future. And that's why people like Rio understand that. A lot of the strategics understand that are investing. A lot of the OEMs are investing upstream into lithium projects now because you need to secure your supply moving forward. So that's the view that we take on that.
You touched on it earlier. I mean, clearly a project of this size and this scope requires discipline. What does the structure of the Phoenix company look like, and who else is involved in terms of delivering the vision that you've got?
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, look, this is a genesis from when I was younger, and being an entrepreneur, you go up and down in your life. And as I said, I mean, I think I may have said this to you before, we've gone from riches to rags to riches to rags to riches again. And that's a function of being aggressive and being an entrepreneur and going all in on projects. Through that, you don't have, when you're growing up and when you're starting your businesses, you don't have time to hire a whole team of people. You've got to do a lot of the stuff yourself. So Phoenix now, I think we have physically 6 or 7 people entirely in the company, which is incredibly small to develop a project like this. Typically, you'd have over 100 people on staff to develop a project like this. We have a small but very dedicated team, as I said. Arnold Wolf in the States, who's our project director, is incredible. We both work extremely long hours. Effectively, Arnold and I developed this asset from the start in 2021, 2020. Together, we've got a great support team here. Directors like Stephen Rummick, who's been very helpful with me. He's also the chief investment officer of our family office. So Stephen's been working with me for many years we've known each other. So we do have a very small team, but a highly skilled team in delivering an asset like this. So you do need the right people. You can't do it all on your own, which I've had to keep reminding myself many times through my life. But yeah, it's a very, very small, tight team that we have to bring this asset forward.
Let's now pivot our discussion with some more general topics and questions. Clearly, you've been remarkably successful as a self-made billionaire in your business career to date. What drives some of the fundamental lessons and experiences that you've been through and had?
Look, as I said, when you start out, you're forced into a lot of positions. You don't want to do them, but you don't have a choice. So it's trial by necessity. And those earlier years taught me that you really have to be bold. You have to go out and take what you're there, you know, what's there. You have to be patient. But I think what's critical, you have to have an instinct for these things. You know, if you're going to do what we do, what I've done, which has been very aggressive in my life, I think two things are really key. You have to be very resilient, because you're going to get knocked down more times than you're up. You're going to have more losses in your life than you're going to have successes. And the principle is you've got to be there to take advantage of the wins. So if you're not there and you're copping out, or things are getting too hard, or you're quitting, you're never going to succeed. So being resilient, making sure you're there, you know, fighting through the pain, fighting through the brick walls, and keeping yourself present is a big part of the battle. You know, that I can't stress to you how important it is that you're there, because so many people give up when it hurts the most. And if you're not there, you're simply not there to take advantage of it. So being there, being resilient is super important. Secondary to that, I think you got to have instincts. You've got to be able to be in the right areas and understand when to give up on things. I've had many failed ventures, many ideas that I thought were going to be incredible. You have to believe in what you're doing, but you also have to understand that if things aren't going well, or there's really no prospect, you've got to be able to walk away from something and not be so big-headed that you take the whole ship down with you. So that's a very delicate balance of being resilient and being there, but understanding when you need to pull away from projects. So that's a skill I think that a lot of people would very much, if they could develop that, would help them very much in their life. So those are the kind of the core two elements that I've learned from, you know, the early part of my career. And then being instinctual, like I said, being able to pick up things and be ahead of the curve and do things that aren't natural. If you want to be an entrepreneur, these are some of the things that you have to do. If you're in other areas of business, you don't necessarily need to have these instincts, but in my business, you have to be ahead of the curve, you have to be resilient, and you have to know when to back off. Those are critical in trying to stay afloat, basically.
You mentioned earlier you describe yourself as an aggressive businessman. Where does that come from, and what does that mean in a practical sense?
Aggressive. Look, I'm a risk taker. Okay, so I'm an instinctual risk taker. I mean, I think I've told you, you know, in the genesis of Phoenix, we had a $100 million facility. We walked away from it. That's not typical, and you really need to have a very strong sense of what you're doing to take those kind of pivots and positions. So I've always been able to do that through my career. Sometimes it stood me well, sometimes not. But as I said, overall, you don't have to have all wins, and you're going to have more losses than wins. But if the wins are good, it can compensate for all the rest, and that's where the position we're in now. So, as you know, I wasn't able to finish school. We had a gulf of information come in with my father passing. It forced me to do things that were not usual for a person of my age. Plus, I think it's genetic as well, potentially. My father was quite an aggressive businessman, a blazing entrepreneur, as I call him, and I think I've obviously got some of those genes. So some of this, I think, is genetic, and some of this is obviously, you know, been put in place by the circumstances. So I am aggressive in the way that I go about business and the way that I do things, and I believe that stood me in very good stead through my career. So again, I don't know anything different because that's me. I haven't lived in anybody else's life, but most people say I'm uber aggressive in how I do things. I like to think of it as calculated aggression. You need to look at things, look at opportunities. You need to be aggressive and go for them. If you're going to do something, you got to do it wholeheartedly, full-bloodedly, or don't do it at all. So that's kind of my approach to how I do things. But, you know, as I'm getting a little bit older, I think you want to try to temper that off a little bit and not be too aggressive all the time. So I'm kind of in that phase now.
In terms of your work ethic, you're often working 6-7 days a week. How important has that ability to work through challenges and work through hurdles along the way and just keep at it? Where does that sort of work ethic originate from, and how important has been working 6-7 days a week been throughout your life?
Look, I'm not proud of working 6-7 days a week. It's certainly not. It's not working smart, smarter than harder and all that stuff. But in the business we're in, like I said, we're running a business now that's a multi-billion-dollar business, and we really don't have that many people. This is born out of, I guess, this is just born out of my upbringing, the way I've done business. Again, I don't know any other way. So it's a natural position for me to just want to do much, much more than an individual person should do. I think I've told you before, some of my team think I should have, 4 or 5 secretaries. I don't have one. So we have great support staff, great lawyers, great accountants, great advisors. Stephen Rummick, who I've mentioned before, has been with me, worked with me for a number of years. So there's 2 or 3 key people that are really core to allowing me to do what I do. But I really do take on more than what I should. I'm very hands-on. I can work 21 days, without stop. That's not good for my health. It's not good for, the lifestyle, but that's just the way I'm built. And I don't know how to do it any differently. I'm trying to temper that down a little bit now, but it's hard for me to do that. So I'm not particularly proud of it, but I think I'm proud of the results that we've achieved by me having this sort of work ethic. And I think it's really made me the person that I am and the way that I do things. So, it is the way that I operate, and it's the only way I know how to do things.
What keeps you motivated and inspired to work each day?
Well, we're not done. So I don't rest on my laurels. I'm not somebody that looks in the rearview mirror. We've got a lot of work to do with Phoenix specifically. As I said, we're in the process now where we're building our first plant. So we're right into the sort of build phase, and there's a lot of work to do there. So we've got a couple of exciting new initiatives coming up, which will hopefully be announced shortly. But like I said, we're at a critical juncture of the company, so there's no resting on the laurels because there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of energy to be put into developing this asset to where it needs to go over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. And there's no resting on that at the moment.
Outside of Phoenix, I understand you've got a significant private portfolio of investments across a range of sectors and industries through your investment vehicle, the Wakim Family Office. Walk me through the genesis of starting and launching your own family office business.
Yeah. So look, as I said, I'm 58 now, so I just turned 58, and you have to sort of sit back and take a look at where you are and what you want to do in your life. And the setting up the family office is really a continuation or the next phase of business for us. I don't want to be a business manager as I am now, 7 days a week operating a business. So we're trying to, as Phoenix develops and as we sort of maybe potentially exit out of that in the next few years or whatever the case may be, I'd like to take more of a position where we're looking at passive investments instead of active management, which is what I'm doing now. So, we've been quite successful in what we're doing, and the family office is the next sort of iteration of what we want to do moving forward. It'll allow me to focus, more on my bloodstock business and passive investments and things like that. So I think now is the right time to set that up, and that's basically, I think we've had it up and running for just over 12 months now. So we're in the formative stages of putting that together, and it'll become much more active like I said, as we transition out of Phoenix and look at more principal investments in philanthropic ventures and things like that.
You still call Melbourne home, and we're fortunate to be filming in one of your private residences here today. Walk me through, just at a high level, how you approach evaluating potential investment opportunities through the family office.
Very unorthodox, as I said. But I'm trying to learn, like I said, I'm very instinctual. So a lot of the investments of the past, where you have to be aggressive, you can take a different approach at the family office. There'll be capital there. So it goes from an aggressive wealth accretion business to a wealth preservation business. So you have to change that. So, we're trying to get into the mindset of the family office of we don't have to be so aggressive. We've done what we've done now. Now it's a matter of managing, creating a legacy for the family, creating, wealth and the ability to be philanthropic. So you don't have to be so aggressive. So we're trying to learn that by I'm trying to learn that by backing off the pedal a little bit and not being so aggressive as we make the transition. So that's kind of the idea there. And we don't want to be risking everything all the time or being super aggressive. So it's nice to be looking at the future with the family office and being able to sort of take things a little bit easier and smell the roses along the way a little bit. Pat a few horses, kiss a few horses, and so forth.
As I said, you've clearly been very financially successful over the years. In terms of succession planning, what does that look like?
Well, as we just touched on before, getting the WFO in place is a big part of that. Making sure that, when I'm not here, the family's secure and, everything is sort of put in place for that. So that all melts together, getting out of management, direct management, getting into passive investments, looking after the family, succession for the family, philanthropic ventures. That's all a seamless meld to me. You come out of one position in your active management, you move into a passive investment management. Doesn't mean we're not going to be doing anything. I'm sure we'll be innovative and so forth, but it doesn't have to be grinding every day, 7 days a week, foot to the pedal, uber aggressive. We don't have to do that anymore. The time has come to sort of sit back and enjoy what we've done in our career and enjoy the family more and spend time with horses. So this is all part and parcel of that. That's why setting up the family office would really allow me to sort of sit back more into an administrative position or an investment committee or sit on the board and look at these assets as opposed to having to run them every single day. So we're kind of in that phase right now.
I hope you don't mind me saying there's been a lot of tragedy along the way in your life, the passing of your father at a young age and more recently the passing of one of your sons. You started a foundation that was named after him. Walk me through how that came about, if you could. Yeah. No, it's all right.
Look, my eldest son passed 3 years ago, and we've set up, we always wanted to be philanthropic. We always wanted to sort of give back, and we thought the best way to do that was to set up a foundation in his name, supporting initiatives that he was interested in, the arts, music, charities. And so, it's something that's very dear to our heart. It sort of forms part and parcel of the family office. You have the family office and you have the foundation. My wife and my son will take a key role in running that or administering that. And, we think it's a lovely way to remember Fareed and also, focus on, initiatives that are going to be important for us and that were important to him. So, that's an area of focus for us for the future.
Just in a general sense, how important is philanthropy and charity for you and the family? I mean, you see a lot of people with wealth that may not necessarily, have as big of an interest in this sort of area. How important do you see it as giving back?
It's becoming much more important to us, especially after Fareed passed. It's really, our whole, our life has changed, and I think through tragedy, you really want to try to do something greater than out of it. So we've always had a mindset to be philanthropic, but it's become even stronger after Fareed passed. And I think it gives us great pleasure as well. One of the great things about philanthropy is you're helping people, but it's also so satisfying. So it's a big part of what we want to do for the future. It's a foundation that we've set up that'll cover a lot of things. So it's not going to be dedicated to one area, but it'll form a large part of what we do for the future. And I think that's going to be very satisfying for us in terms of being able to give back. We've been look, like I said, we've had tragedy in our life, but we've also been successful in where we are, and I think it's very important that we can do the right things and give back as we move forward in our life.
I also want to ask you about Thoroughbred breeding and racing, which is another field of interest of yours. Where did that passion come from, and what are the long-term goals, do you think, for that?
Well, you're on a very important point now. Now you're on the key point, basically. Look, I've been passionate about thoroughbreds and horses my whole life. When we were in Chicago, I was about 8 years old at the time. I told you my dad was quite an aggressive businessman. He was a raging punter. And we lived, near Arlington Park, not far from Arlington Park in Chicago. So he would go to the races. I was about 8, and I'd tag along, and I just saw these thoroughbreds, and I fell in love with them immediately. And so from about the age of 8, I was really aware of horses and loved them. When we moved to England, we lived on basically an estate. We had horses there, so I was riding. I'm an equestrian from way back, show jumping, 3-day eventing, 1-day eventing, puissance, so I've been engrossed into horses, and it's been my searing passion my whole life. And, as you're growing up, you don't have the ability to do many, horses is a dedicated sport. It's quite capital intensive. And when you're growing up, you don't really have the ability to focus on that. But now, in the later part of my life, I've been able to set up a lovely farm, and I breed and race my own thoroughbreds. And that's really a passion of mine. And as we get out of active management, as we said, into the sort of family office, I'm hoping it frees me up where I can spend more time and dedicate more time to the horses and spend more time with the horses. So hopefully that'll be the case.
Like I said, you're still based in Australia, though travel extensively throughout the year. What do you see are the advantages or disadvantages of running a business in Australia as compared with, say, the Middle East or the US?
Well, I'll give you an example for Phoenix. Administration is here, operations are in America. Look, I have some firm views. I'm not political by any means, but I have some firm views on Australia. I don't like what I see in terms of the business landscape. I think we've gotten into this position where people are very entitled here now. I don't see the work ethic here anymore. Since COVID as well, I think this is a global phenomena, really, where people have really sort of down-tooled in terms of progression, in terms of sort of moving forward. So I think Australia particularly, and when I look at other countries, falls behind in that aspect. Productivity, I think, is very, very low here, which is a real problem for me. And when I look at young people, you just don't see that drive anymore that you used to. And like I said, I think that's very problematic here. Obviously, from a social construct and from a security construct, Australia is a great place to be, to raise a family. It's quite secure and safe. So there's very strong elements to it. But I think in the economic fronts and the economic elements, I think we're very challenged here right now. And I think the government has lost its way. Successive governments have lost their way in the last 15 years, and it's getting worse. And I think we need a reset where you have to take care of the people, but you can't stifle progression with business. Business creates jobs, creates opportunities, creates wealth going forward, and I don't see those metrics in Australia right now. So I think those are challenging points that need to be addressed and need to be addressed very quickly, especially on the productivity front. And if Australia's been able to do that, I think it would be in a much better position moving forward, especially in the world that's dynamically changing right now, as you can see. You don't want to get left behind in these areas. So I think there's a lot of challenges here, as most countries have challenges, but specifically those are issues that I see here that need to be addressed.
Final question. You've achieved a lot, so much in your life today, both personally and professionally. What's left that you still want to achieve over the next decade or two?
I'd like to retire, basically. No, look, I mean, I'm not a person that can sit down, and do nothing. I don't really like to go on holiday. I love spending time. My downtime is with my horses. So as we develop Phoenix, which is my core focus right now, getting that to a position where we commercialize it, we either exit out of it or whatever, I'd like to spend more time, with the family and so forth, spend more time with the horses. I really want to try to transition and take a back step. I'm naturally inquisitive in terms of doing things. I'm naturally busy-minded person. So like I said, if I go on holiday for a couple of days, that's probably me done, you know. So big trips and whatever is really not me. And I really like to stay, you know, more around the house or with the horses or whatever the case may be. So I'm hoping that we can do that. And I think that the family office will have its dedicated investments, which will obviously be very interesting for me to develop with my son and my family and my team, which I'm looking forward to. But I'm really looking forward to sort of taking the edge off the sort of intense work schedule that we've had. I'm hoping I can do that anyway. Some of the people around me say it's not going to happen, but I'm definitely going to try to do that, and we'll see how we go.
Nick Wakim, it's been a pleasure having the opportunity to share your career and your success. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.